is now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, given the trajectory of the Russian oil revenues, has the administration sanction on oil from Russia been a failure?
We have taken important actions. Of course, the United States is sanctioned. We're not allowed to purchase Russian oil. And by and large, the G7 is not purchasing Russian oil. And we have taken very important steps to reduce the revenue that Russia is able to earn from its oil production and sales by placing a price cap on sales of Russian oil that make use of any G7 service, including insurance or shipping. And the Russia's revenue, but we also want to make sure that the oil market remains, the global oil market remains well supplied so that oil prices don't spike as a consequence of Russia's inability to sell any of their oil. Russia's revenues
why are the Russians' revenue going up?
Russia's revenue is roughly halved over the last year. Russian authorities have indicated that the price cap that we've placed on Russian oil has had a very serious negative impact on them, reducing their revenues. Their budget has gone from large surplus to deficit, and they've had to change the way in which they tax their oil companies to derive revenue from oil sales, something that's harming their long-run ability to invest in the oil industry. I think our policy there has been quite successful.
All right. Why hasn't the administration acted aggressively to impose sanctions on China for the apparent human rights violations, such as those experienced by the Uyghurs?
We have put in place sanctions for human rights violations and continue to examine further sanctions that we can levy.
Well, the president vetoed my Congressional Review Act resolution aimed at stopping the Commerce Department's solar panel rule that allows China's solar panels to evade our tariffs by permitting them through third world nations. Why do you support giving the Chinese the exemption?
So what we do at Treasury is we focus on sanctions on Xinjiang for human rights abuses, and I'm not familiar with the Commerce Department's thinking on this issue.
Well, so you weren't consulted on it at all? I mean, you have no clue about what's going on?
I haven't been involved in that aspect of policy toward China.
But, you said you aim to do something about human rights violations, and you just seem totally unconcerned about this.
I am concerned about human rights violations. I think that's a core principle of U.S. policy toward China, is that we will not do business with China in cases where there are human rights violations, and have put in place meaningful sanctions.
Yeah, do you have any idea why he vetoed the legislation that would put the slave labor at a disadvantage instead of an advantage over American products?
Sorry, I'm not familiar with the legislation in detail.
Okay. What is the Biden administration's strategy to use our participation in international financial institutions to address and mitigate the threats posed by China to our financial and economic well-being and to the geopolitical stability?
So we have taken the position that the multilateral development banks, particularly the World Bank, should graduate China and cease lending to China. And we are working very hard to try to get China to meet its responsibilities when it comes to debt restructuring and debt relief. And we've had some success in those efforts. China's played a constructive role in Ghana and Sri Lanka, but there are other
The gentleman's time has
countries
expired.
like Zambia.
The gentleman